Hey Gemini, this is Seven Scorpion Tarot, and I want to welcome you to tonight's reading. So, tonight I was seeing that we've got Jupiter in your sign, and so the theme of this reading will be looking at broadening of the horizons of expansive thought, and that's happening in the first house right now. Uh, Good timing for Aries season, so that would be in the areas of identity, of new beginnings, of the body, and I think that's actually a really good follow up to Taurus's reading because that was themed around rebellion and rebelling against something, maybe something that you have held dear your whole life or something that you believed in your whole life. That could be shifting your perspective around your identity. I know I went through a lot of that in recent years. Uh, we'll do a self, shadow, and ego, and we'll see maybe in those areas where we might need to broaden our perspectives, broaden our horizons, and see kind of where that gets us. So I'll start shuffling for the self here after I light my next incense stick. There we go. So in the self, we're broadening our horizons regarding. I mean, when it comes to new beginnings, that might be what shape your new beginning could take. Because if you're rebelling against something like a system, a family structure, something like that, even a faith structure, there's probably a lot of changes going on in your life. And that can be scary. You may not know where those are going to take you. Yeah, 10 of Wands. Actually, in reverse, too. And there's a siren outside. So a setting down of the burden. That doesn't feel quite right because it's in reverse. Or is it a burden you don't want to let go of? Because the 10 of Wands is like, that's the last, like, hump to get over. So maybe this is the never ending burden of, like, why won't it end? Why will this new beginning not come in? Uh, Maybe there's some sort of resistance to the flow of you're trying to steer this new beginning in a specific direction and it doesn't want to go that way, and so you're at like a standstill, just stuck, really. I wonder what the book says about the reversal. um Swords, cups, wands. Reverse, the Ten of Wands is a reminder that putting off smaller tasks can lead to a more significant burden. So maybe some procrastination is going on. Uh, huh. What could that be? I want to get a clarifier, actually. What is the nature of the burden? Good morning, Kitten. What is the nature of this burden that maybe we can't put down, feel like we can't put down. Got our little energy transmuter here. I don't know if she's going to come up on the table or not. She looks a little sleepy. Sleepy? Oh, here she comes. Come on up. So something maybe intensely emotional, since my emotional support animal has joined the party. And you're floopy. I need to brush you. Uh, so a heavy burden that you may need a buddy for. A floofy buddy. She's floofing everywhere. Ooh, justice in reverse. That is a heavy burden. So are you carrying around uh, an injustice from the past? Thank you. Thanks for the cheek rubs. But an injustice from the past that is just clinging on to you? Or do you need to shift your perspective around that injustice? And this is one of those things that, uh, like at first brush, I don't like how a lot of people present this idea of find the lesson in the suffering, which usually comes across as like, this is happening for you, not to you. Nope, things happen to you. Bad things happen. I don't agree with that. Ma'am, can you not? Uh, and you need time to feel that pain, however long it takes. Everybody's on their own path, their own journey, has their own context. And in these cards, sorry, uh, that time that you may have needed, it may take a full suit. It may take all the way to the 10 of Wands. So saith the confirmation sirens outside of you have to go through every step of that suit with whatever this is and build that relationship to that lesson, to that pain, to that injustice before you can put that burden down. And that's okay. Uh, I get really, really irritated at these notions of like, it's time to move on. Says who? Is there a test? Like, what? Like, people will say that without putting in an iota of effort into understanding what happened, how it affected you, things like that. Uh, and if they're giving you advice without doing discovery, reconsider that advice. My unsolicited opinion. I'll start shuffling for the shadow. Uh, it's important to find the lesson in the pain. Bypassing doesn't help. It kicks the can down the road, and it might even intensify things. Like you could cut your toe on the can when you're kicking it down the road, uh, instead of just picking it up and putting it in the trash bag, you know? And you can only do what you can do if you are in a state where you are still dissociating from that pain. Seek professional help. Ma'am, you have your own water. Hey, excuse me. Can you not? Thank you. Uh, but there's if it's really acute, really intense, there's the 9988 number if you're in the States. Not sure for other countries what that might be, but there's various like crisis text lines and things like that if you need to talk to somebody like right now. And uh, there's always telehealth options as well. Those might be more accessible. They might even be more reasonably priced depending on your insurance provider, things like that. Like, there's a lot of different things to look into, support groups as well. Uh, there will come a time, though, when it is time to set that burden down, or at least on the shelf, so that you can move forward. Because you don't need to be all the way healed in order to move forward with your life. It may, like, to the outside onlooker, come across as callous, and it's not their business. Like, if they're making judgments about you without trying to understand the situation, forget them. Like, what are they doing to help? You have to do what you have to do to manage in this crazy world. you know, like, there's work and chores and social lives and all sorts of things that need to have tending to, that heavy burdens can get in the way of. They can dominate those other things. And they can dominate in like a sneaky way as like an undertone. High Priestess. I wasn't sure if that was going to flip over or not. Uh, so High Priestess in the shadow. Interesting. So processing these emotions, this injustice, whatnot, and being able to set down that burden helps elevate you to a different level. It helps give you access to the hidden knowledge in your shadow. This may even open a pathway, and I'm going to reiterate, as I've said many times, I am not a professional, not a doctor, not a mental health professional, entertainment purposes only, yada, yada, yada. But dropping this injustice might give you the mental space to access some sort of repressed memory. Uh, and it's weird how those traumatic memories kind of come up, because I find they come up like almost in times of peace. Like when you're in a really relaxed state is when that memory has space to surface. And I'm not guaranteeing, of course, that that is what's going to occur. Can we not light your tail on fire? Appreciate that. Uh, and it could just give you the mental space, the mental bandwidth to examine things that you haven't had the space or bandwidth to examine because you've been holding on to this injustice. And when I say like you've been holding on to that, I don't want to minimize or dismiss what it is you've been going through, but that will dominate your thought process. It won't give you just the room for it. Like, you need to have an empty chair for those other pain points to sit in. They have to have space to come forward. And the high priestess, she has knowledge, she has secrets. This could even be getting in touch with a spiritual practice. Uh, that is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, this Jupiter placement in your sign in the first house of broadening the perspective of identity. I was in the broom closet for 20 years. And in regards to my sexual identity, I'm straight passing. It was always like, it's good enough. We don't need to go into who she really is, in my childhood home. Uh, and that's so damaging to the psyche, to the self. Like that is probably my own injustice that's coming forward of I held on so fervently to these systems that I was conditioned to believe they were acting in my best interest when they were not. And by systems, I mean like family systems and faith systems and things like that, and even the rejection of faith systems. Uh, because, like, it's one thing to say that you are tolerant and accepting and so on and so forth, uh, up until you have a witch for a daughter. That's the real test, and they didn't pass. I'll start shuffling for the ego. Uh, yeah, when the rubber hits the road, I think I mentioned that in the Taurus reading. Those things are different, like the words and the actions. And the imagery with the pomegranate makes me think of Persephone, of maybe you have been trapped in, or maybe not even trapped, but immersed in the healing processing of these wounds for however many seeds you ate, in accordance with the myth. But maybe you've been in a time of deep reflection, introspection, even isolation of, that hermit card maybe has gone from the upright into the reverse of now now we're unbalanced of okay, it was necessary, like of going hardcore into the healing journey, but you got to come up for air. Uh, that's a really important part of the process. And you'll be coming up for air with new knowledge of yes, you may have been hurt, and cards presenting like this, you were hurt. Um, I don't like that phrasing that I just used because that sounded like the I'm sorry you feel that way. I feel that way because of how you treated me. Like, no kidding. Um, having processed these wounds, you now have additional tools. Like we've got the wand, the cup, the sword, and the pentacle. And now you have additional tools that you didn't have previously when you originally experienced these injustices to help prevent this from happening again or to respond more effectively if it occurs again. Because people be people, and you know, unfortunately, the healing journey does not include never having to encounter an antagonistic personality ever again. That is a utopia that does not exist. There will always be challenging personality types out there, and people that, for whatever godforsaken reason, just want to see you fail because it makes them feel better about their little selves. I don't know. Uh, and same thing with the like high school games of when you're in a relationship with somebody, especially when it's like new, uh, keep it to yourself. Things grow better in the dark. There's a more solid foundation, and because people still play those high school games of like, well, I'm gonna break them up, or I'm gonna, stir the pot or whatever. Like, why? We're adults. Like, we all have ibuprofen in our pockets at this point. Like, come on. uh, like I have my home ibuprofen, my car ibuprofen. Like it used to be chapstick, and now it's medicine because my body hurts. Uh, but yeah, people be people in, and not to everybody's benefit. Like that could mean different things. That could be a positive. I'm using it in a derogatory way. Uh, it doesn't have to be that way. That could mean like, oh, they were nice and generous and altruistic, but it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. And I don't know. People also don't like you moving on from wounds. Uh, it's weird. It's weird to me. Like they want the version of you that exists in their head is like the version of you that they want to exist forever, as if people don't learn, grow, and change. Mm. And like I went from, I have run the gamut on belief structures. Like I've been in the middle, in agnostic of like, I don't know. I've been atheist earnestly, and now I'm back to earnest belief. And the mechanism for that was a near death experience. Uh, Interestingly enough, the few people that are aware that I have returned to earnest belief, or are at least hearing about that for the first time and have heard and have known me to be an atheist, have not inquired as to like what happened. Why did this change? Which is interesting to me. Why no one is taking an interest. I mean, I think I know the reason. Uh, but regardless, there could be some of that going on too, that like people may not want to accept the true self because that belief was always there. Like it's really complicated, really, really complicated. Uh, and having religious trauma in the background too makes it even more complicated. There is no easy way to navigate faith. Uh, but when you change, when you grow, when you reveal the true self that has been hidden that whole time, it may not be accepted. And that hurts. That doesn't feel good because it's such a relief. It is such a lifting of a burden to not have to hide the true self anymore. Uh, and it's eye opening to me as I've gone through this process of how little support I have. Like, restoring a belief system That's a massive change. Massive change. That's not being taken an interest in. I don't know. Maybe there's something like that going on for you. And I think the most important part, though, is that you accept yourself. And once that authentic self has been realized, you can start that quest, that journey to find where you really belong. And it's hard. It does feel like starting over. And I didn't think I'd be doing that at this point in my life, starting over. Uh, but what do you do after a near death experience? Like, go back to the same thing? Yeah, I have the free will to do that, but I have absolutely no desire to. But you could be broadening your perspective around, like, your social circle of what what does that new identity mean for the door into your life? Like, who gets a key and who gets an invitation and who gets a locked door? You know, that might take some reevaluating. And I would say, like, how do I put this? Because if you haven't talked to somebody in a while and then you're sharing with them these like massive changes, if it's with a faith structure, something like that, something regarding identity, uh, it may be perceived as sudden. And I think that's something to be really mindful about, because sudden changes in personality can be cause for concern. Consider the perception, though, of like they're just finding this out. So they're having a reaction, whatever that reaction may be, particularly if they're not a fan of witchcraft or whatever it is that you're doing. The other example that's coming to mind is like someone who's trans. If they're not accepting of your true identity, they may try to like put the kibosh on it. They might try to pump the brakes. And it's your identity. It's your life. If you are mentally, emotionally well, stable, whatnot, and they're just being flat out unaccepting of the real you, I wouldn't take their advice. That would be my recommendation. Maybe maintain distance, because that example, you know, said maybe you guys haven't talked in a while. There might be a reason for that. King of Pentacles in reverse in the ego. Hmm. Oh, okay. So even though this is a court card, I'm not reading it as an individual. I'm kind of reading it as like an influence. Uh, so I feel like in that example of like somebody that hasn't seen you in a while, they might go like, well, what about your success? Like, what about your life? Whatnot? Like, uh, I'm thinking of back to many, many jobs ago when I was an admissions counselor for a university. And every so often, actually, it was really a good mix where I would get a student who they were looking at a second career. And so reinventing themselves, starting over. Uh, if that is where you are in life and you haven't talked to somebody in a while, they may try to talk you out of whatever change it is that's good for you, or the change that you're pursuing, whatever change in your life that is. Back to the someone who's trans example. Uh, People got a lot of opinions about that. And having a conversation with someone in and of itself is not a bad thing. What's their agenda? I think it was, and I am referencing that Taurus reading a lot. Maybe there's something, they're intricately intertwined. But I was talking about the perception, the public perception versus the private, of that I had a parent who they would go to like specific marches for different causes, be the keyboard warrior and whatnot, but I had to be silent. My voice was suppressed. So this might be the naysayer, the like doom and gloom that, oh, if you do this, your life is over. Like, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to pay your rent, whatnot. And I'm not telling you to go quit your job. Have a plan. And there's always going to be gotchas, like things that you're not going to see coming. Just do the best you can to like plan for contingencies and stuff. And if you always, like, if you're waiting for conditions to be perfect, you're always going to be waiting. That's just going to be a perpetual state. Um, it's kind of like, I think when they're talking about like the ethereal day, uh, dating, like if you always wait for the perfect partner, like you're just going to be waiting. Like nobody's perfect. Uh, I'm not saying just go for, because no one's perfect, just the next Joe Schmo, Mary Jane, who comes along, whomever, like, oh, that one, good enough. No, you still need standards. Uh, you still need to thin the herd. Might need to kiss a few frogs, but it's not the end of the world to be reinventing yourself. As long as there is breath in your chest, you have the opportunity to do that. And conditions, like we talked about, may not be perfect. They may not even be ideal. Uh, they might not even be like approaching ideal. But if you're living a life that was based on an inauthentic identity, that's a pretty low shot at happiness. Not impossible, but very low. You just got to do what you can. Anomaly. Ooh. Hmm. Oh, and there's dandelions in the background. So a wish. Maybe a wish is coming true? Maybe you've wished to be different this whole time. And that's the way you were. So maybe you're becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to go for this deck since the crow's white. uh, but maybe you've been restless as part of the crowd of, because not being able to be yourself is an injustice. It is a burden. You've been an anomaly this whole time. And you needed to get in touch with that high priestess self, go deep down into the shadow, and acquire that knowledge that those wounds grant you, that healing those wounds, becoming acquainted with those wounds, and really getting to know them. That is really powerful stuff. Uh, and whoever this, if you've got a naysayer in your energy, maybe they know. Maybe they knew the whole time that you were an anomaly and they've been trying to stop it, stop that progression. Interesting. Uh, eyeball. Ooh. Uh, that's the vibe I'm getting though. That like other people could see how different you were and they tried to squash that out of you. And so many creatives like deal with that plight of like, you'll never make money. You know, reverse King of Pentacles, like you'll end up starving in the street. You know, maybe you need to develop some sort of trade skill, something like that, something that you can earn a paycheck off of, and then pursue your creative stuff outside of that. Like, I have a day job. This is not my primary source of income. Uh, I would not be able to pay rent where I live on an Oracle salary. It's just not going to happen. Uh, Not in this economy. We are not the revered members of the community we once were. Uh, but and being able to pay rent and earn money and whatnot, that is a legitimate concern. I'm not trying to dismiss that, and but needing to pay bills also is not a reason to fully drop what you love doing, what you enjoy learning about, whatever your creative pursuit is. So we've got Titanfall. I've actually been playing a lot of this recently. I mean, the second one, because the servers for the first one got shut down a while ago. Uh, but it's just a little, a popcorn game that I can pick up and put down. Play a few rounds of it just to take my focus off of whatever it is I'm reflecting on. This wound that I'm trying to put down, and just step away and like, I can't think my way out of this any harder. I need to check out and do something interactive, and something that's not really part of either my day job or this or my side hustle, either thing. It's just for enjoyment. It's just to kick back, to turn my mind off for a little bit. Uh, I personally like to overlay music on it. Something really high paced, like Rob Zombie, System of a Down, something like that. But super fun game. And overall, I hope this helps. I hope this resonates. And if it doesn't, I hope the next one does. Thank you so much.